What's up, everybody? Azariel here, and welcome to another episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! 101 Retro Modernization, where I make unplayable builds and archetypes playable. And that is the goal here for all retro modernization videos for future reference, that I am making unplayable archetypes and builds playable. I'm not trying to make them tournament worthy. I think that's doing too much for the builds that I'm using. I'm simply trying to make them playable. And in this uh, video, we're going to be taking a look at another build. If you guys want to check out last week's video, of course, you can go to my channel and look at the playlist for Retro Modernization. I did the Cloudians last week, arguably the hardest archetype to make a build out of in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. And I did that already, so you guys go check that out. But this week, we're going to be taking a look at my build, Amazoness Law version 2. Uh, where I am making the Amazoness, which in fact people have said, are unplayable because of various reasons. But I'm gonna get into that, in a little bit. But yeah, people have always said that the Amazon, well, these days more so than before, people say that the Amazoness aren't. It's not that they're not good. People, well, from what I've been told, Amazoness Queen is the only good card that makes the Amazoness, really, really good. The thing that makes the Amazoness so difficult to use is that they're weak. That's the one thing you have to be aware of when using an Amazoness build, is that they require an attack boost. But before I get into all those specifics, first let me give you the rundown of the monsters in the main deck, card, the monsters in the non-monster cards that I have in the main deck, the monsters that I have in the extra deck, and as well as some of the cards that I have in the side deck, and we can go from there. All right. So for starters, the monsters in the main deck. For the cards in the main deck, we have three Amazoness Fighter, three Amazoness Paladin, three Amazoness Queen, three Amazoness Sage, three Amazoness Swordwoman, three Amazoness Trainee, three Warrior Lady of the Wasteland. I have three Amazoness Heirloom, three Amazoness Village, a Darkhold, three MST, a reinforcement of the army, three Solidarity, two Mirror Force, one No Entry, three Rivalry of the Warlord, and three Waboku. And for the extra deck, I have three Comics Hero King Arthur. I have Fairy King Albert Alberdirch. I have one Gauntlet Launcher, one Gandiva. I have two Gandiva. I have one Kusanagi, two Utopia, and two Zubaba General. Well, one Zubaba General. Um, and for the extra deck, I have Pinpoint Guard. Uh, I have two No Entry. I have two Goes in Match, one Terraforming, three Monster Slots, and I just added in Hidden Armory and Amazoness Tiger for the sake of the video. Those weren't in there before, so now let me give you the overall strategy of the build, and then how to go about doing that in an ideal situation, or with the ideal hand that you would want to have, or so just however you want to put it. So the main problem that, again, as I've stated earlier, with the Amazoness build, that people say that makes it so hard, or quote unquote so unplayable, is that Amazoness Queen their is Amazoness Queen always seems to be their focus point, and it's like they never try to do as much as they can with the Amazoness monsters outside of Queen, like besides Queen, or they add too much with the non-monster support cards, and they end up making a cluttered mess with the build to where they can't make it playable. It's very inconsistent, and it just becomes like a jumbled mess. So what I did with the build is that I just took a look at everything that was there. Hence the reason why this deck is called version 2. Version 1, I made a lot of mistakes. A lot of those mistakes where I seen why people was having trouble, you know, playing a or making a playable Amazoness build because they added too much to the build, or they were too focused on getting Queen out on the field and they weren't trying to use the other monsters to do something with. So this build, saying like just like my Cloudian build from last week, it's very well, so like just based on like uh today's standards, it's not very slow, but it's not super fast either. Like it's right there in the middle. You have cards in here that can search out, your monsters that you need, as well as maintain some field advantage with the cards there, which is good because they need that, as well as boost the attack power, which they also need, and protect the monsters in the event that you do not have anything to raise their attack power. You can still protect them and leave them on the field, as well as not taking any battle damage or like reflect that battle damage from the monster effects that are on there. So with that being said, Amazoness Spider and Amazoness Swordswoman are really going to be like your two go-to beat sticks to do anything with, because with Swordswoman like reflects battle damage that you would have taken to your opponent's life points as effect damage, and Amazoness Fighter just reduces the battle damage that you will receive to 0. So those are your two go-to beat sticks. Sage is your MST, and you attach Heirloom to Sage, then you pretty much got a safe, pretty much like a safe MST, because the effect of Sage activates at the end of the damage step. So right as soon as the attack finishes, the effect activates, and you can target one of your opponent's spells or traps that you feel that you are very cautious about, and you can get rid of them. But in the event that, say, your opponent has like skill drain or something like that, of course, there's 3 MSTs in there, as backup. Now, Amazoness Paladin is one of the stronger monsters in the build, and it can raise its own attack power along with the other attack boosting cards. So this is a beat stick that can be helpful to you in a tight spot when you just need that little extra something, you know. So like when you need that extra, so like 100 or extra like 200 points, and you want to take advantage to the monsters that you have on your side of the field, or the Amazoness monsters that you have on your side of the field, and you can use them to power up Paladin. So that's very you know, so like that's very helpful. Without me mumbling over my words, Amazoness Trainee is one of those cards that, as long as you can raise the attack power of Amazoness Trainee to something that your opponent can't handle, then you pretty much got a pretty good card on your hands. So with that being said, there's Solidarity. Of course, the effect of Solidarity stacks, if I'm not mistaken. I did look it up, so I'm pretty sure that the effect stacks. Like, please forgive me because I haven't looked at the card ruling in a while, but I think it does stack. Like the effect of Solidarity. But one of these cards right here can change the tide of the duel in your favor, because 800 extra points of attack power can really come in handy. I've witnessed it, and all it takes is one Solidarity to really cause your opponent trouble. The Amazoness monsters, of course, their attacks are low, with the exception of Queen and to a lesser extent Paladin, and they can really benefit from Solidarity. On top of the fact that they're all warrior monsters in there, so I want you to keep that in mind, because Solidarity is a very important card for this build. And when I talk about the extra deck monsters, that's when you're really going to have to pay attention to what, or to really how you play this build. Now, I have Amazoness, I mean, not Amazoness, I said Amazoness. I have Warrior Lady of the Wasteland in there because, of course, it searches out Earth attribute warrior type monsters with 1500 attack or less. So you can target, Amazoness Swordswoman, Amazoness Fighter, Sage, and even Trainee, or even another copy of itself to the field, you know, to help protect your life points. So that's one of those cards that can really, that this deck really benefits from in terms of speed, because it can really um, use this to help get some of those monsters out that you may need in that situation. Now, Queen is an ass saver, and I mean that in every way possible. I had kind of I had kind of spoken on it in past videos where I said that I used this build to beat a shooting quasar spam deck, and this card was the key card that helped me do that, because people don't really value effects like your monsters can't be destroyed by battle, you know, as much as they should. Because when you have this at your disposal and your Amazoness monster can't and your Amazoness monsters can't be destroyed by battle, you don't realize how valuable that is until you have that at your disposal. That has saved my ass, and that has helped me win duels with this build on so many occasions. During practice sessions or even during fan day events. Queen is that bitch, and I mean that in every sense of the word. She rules with an iron fist, and when she hits the field, you can make your opponent very, very worried. Because on top of the solidarity that you may have in even village, that's 1,000 attack. 1,000 attack. Saying just between one village and saying like one solidarity. You have the monsters and the cards in place to cause trouble for your opponent. But here's the thing. Don't be so focused on trying to get Queen out that you end up messing up with Paladin, Fighter, Amazoness Swordswoman, Sage, Trainee, etc. Because I've seen people use Amazoness builds before, and that's one of the biggest mistakes that they make. Either they don't try to use Queen because Queen does take one tribute. It is level 6, but if you're able, well, when you get it on the field, boy, the benefits that you gain from having that. So let that be one of your strategies, but don't make that your main strategy, quote unquote, just to get it out. If you draw it in your hand and you have the monsters to tribute for it, good. But in the meantime, maintain your field advantage with the other monsters in the build, so that when you do draw Queen, you'll be able to tribute Summoner. So that's some advice. Now, Village is good, for the Amazoness monsters, of course, because you can replace the monsters that get destroyed by battle or by card effects. So that alone is helpful. On top of that, you gain a 200 attack boost, which is always helpful. Heirloom, again, I've explained that earlier. Heirloom is a card that can prevent your Amazoness monsters from being destroyed once per turn, which is very good for Sage, because that's your MST. In monster form, which is good for Amazoness Swordswoman for reflecting damage to your opponent, or for Fighter when you need, to just prevent any battle damage from being done to you. So Heirloom is really good. Of course, Reinforcements of Army is in there. I don't think any sensible warrior build would not run it. 2 Mirror Forces are in there. These days, I would probably switch those out uh, with Dimensional Prison, just for the simple fact that it seems like these days more people are running monsters that can't be destroyed by card effects, and with Prison you can just snatch them on the field and they can get banished. So I think Prison is more reliable, but if you feel comfortable enough with Mirror Force, of course, just leave it in there. Or if you're more cautious about the monsters that your opponents may be using, then yeah, of course, add Prison there. No entry. This is another one of those situational cards. In the event that you go up against a build that has monsters that can't be destroyed by card effects, you can still prevent them from, like attacking you. And that's the same thing that goes with, well, not really the same thing, but the whole idea is to prevent your opponent from doing any battle damage to you. With no entry, it just switches all the monsters from face-up attack position to face-up defense position. So that can prevent your opponent's monsters from attacking. And of course, there's Waboku that can prevent you from taking battle damage as well as preventing your monsters from being destroyed. So that's really good for the Amazonas. Since you want to maintain that field advantage for when you draw Queen, this is actually a pretty good card to keep in there. Um, Now, Rivalry of the Warlords, I added 3 in there just for the simple fact that I have in the main deck. In the main deck, I have uh, 44 cards, and I've never had a situation where I drew Rivalry of the Warlords, too early or like too late, so to speak. Like I've always seemed to draw it at the right time. And the reason why there's 3 in there is because I wanted to draw Rivalry of the Warlords as soon as possible, but not have to worry about drawing too many of them, too soon. Because this is another one of those, you know, cards that really helps the Amazonas out, and they really make the Amazonas build here a threat to your opponent, because you can only control one. Each player can only control one face-up type of monster, and since all the monsters that you're going to be controlling are warriors, you have nothing to worry about. Your opponent, on the other hand, these days they run aqua type builds that have fire monsters in it. That has that also has spellcasters and basically builds that have different types of monsters. So this is really going to cause trouble for your opponent if they are using builds that run multiple types of monsters. And depending on what you're more worried about, or even what the situation calls for, I have 2 Gozen matches in here. Of course, if you're more worried about, or if you're going up against an opponent that has monsters that has various attributes, then of course that's basically that version of Rivalry of the Warlords, except it's just based on attributes instead. So Rivalry of the Warlords is really good for the build. Keeps your opponent's monsters in an ideal situation to a minimum. You know, it limits to what they can summon. You, on the other hand, are pretty much home free. You have nothing to worry about. And this is where I go on into the extra deck, because this is where you really got to focus. Now, for the most part, as you can see, all of the extra deck monsters are warrior type monsters, which keeps it in the position of where you can benefit from solidarity. But Fairy King is a plant type monster. Now, it can only be exceed summoned by using Earth attribute monsters, which all of the Amazonas monsters are, including Warrior Lady of the Wasteland. That's Earth attribute. Um, and it reduces the attack and defense of all non-Earth attribute monsters. And this goddamn thing just got fucking... Hold on. Sorry about that, man. I hate when that happens. But yeah, it lowers the attack and defense of all non-Earth attribute monsters by 500, which is great for them. Which is great for the Amazonas, because they need as much help with reducing either your opponent's monsters' attack and defense, or increasing their own attack and defense. So that they can have the advantage when it comes to battles. And you have to be very, very cautious when using Fairy King, because again, it affects solidarity if it hits the graveyard. So use Fairy King with caution, because either it can greatly benefit you or it can really mess you up bad. So in a tight spot, if you feel like you need that extra something, then summon it. But if it's not needed, then don't worry about it. Because really, the extra deck, or rather, like the way that I have it designed for this build, is that it's really meant to fit like whatever your situation is. If you need to do some extra burn damage, then like you have, comics hero King Arthur. If you need some extra like attack damage that you can't get for whatever reason, and you have two monsters that can get Zubaba General on the field, and you have like a queen in your hand, um, then exceed summon into this, attach queen to Zubaba General, get that attack boost, and so like do whatever battle damage you need to do in order to so like win the game. Um, Kusanagi and Gendiva are in there, as emergencies, for the event that you may be worried about either trap cards or your opponent may be, or may have a build that is, suddenly doing a lot of special summons. Again, that's the situation. If you're running, multiple queens, and your opponent has monsters that also can't be destroyed by battle, exceed summon into a gauntlet launcher and destroy it, and then attack. Of course, there's Utopia. Don't really need Utopia, but it's a warrior monster. It's in there, to prevent your opponent from attacking you or whatever. So the extra deck is really secondary. It's not like most of today's builds where the focal point is to get an exceed monster out. Because I've won builds without even having to exceed summon. Exceed summoning is not the primary focus of this build. The focus of this build is to maintain field advantage while protecting your monsters and getting queen on the field when the opportune time comes. So overall, again, just like with the Cloudian build from last week, this build is meant to be played very carefully, very slowly. It's not one of those autopilot builds that's going to play itself. You have to actually think before you act. Be cautious of what your opponent has and make sure that you don't jump the gun and get too excited. Be aware, because that's how I've won duels with this build. You have to be cautious. You have to be aware of what your opponents have, and don't panic just because you feel like you don't have the cards that you may need. Look at what you have and think, because it's been times when I played this build and I thought I had nothing, but when I sat there and I thought about my options and what I was able to do with what I had in my hand, I ended up turning the duel around in my favor. So you really have to do some thinking for yourself. And I know that's going to turn a lot of people away from it because they don't like to do that. Everybody likes to build to do the thinking for them, or they like some OCG net deck profile to do that for them. You know, this, even though you see it and I can tell you how to play it, the experience is your best teacher. And that's really going to come in handy as you play this build. You need to learn how to play a deck without relying on, you know, everything other than your own experience. Because your experience is really going to come in handy when you play this. And you just have to be careful. It plays slowly, not too slow to where it's, not fast. Of course, you have Warrior Lady of the Wasteland and you have Reinforcements of the Army. Like, you have the cards in the build to be a threat to your opponent. And if you guys want to see this build in action, I used it during the April 30th YuGiOh 101 Fan Day event. And I believe I won that duel that I was in. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this retro modernization. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next week when we take a look at a build that I've been working on, for quite some time now. Uh, Pretty much for like 2 or 3 weeks now. When we retro modernize the Gate Guardians, yes, Gate Guardian, a, a monster that was very popular back in the earlier days of Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's been forgotten about. But I've taken my time. I've made a build with it, and that was the build that really gave me the idea of retro modernization. So it's going to be fun. So next week, see you guys for the Gate Guardian build that I made for retro modernization, and I will see you guys then. Keep dueling.